At 11 o'clock on this day, the 11th of November in 1918, the most terrible war the world had ever seen ended. 9 million young men on both sides had died. 2 years later, 70 years ago today, this cenotaph was unveiled by King George V, an empty tomb built as a memorial to the 1.5 million British and Empire men killed in that war. And on that day, many in the watching crowds, like those who've come here this morning, must have hoped that the experience of that war would be so sobering that war itself might die. But a Second World War followed from 1939 to 1945, and since then our forces have seen action in Malaya, Korea, Suez, Aden, the Falklands, and of course Northern Ireland. If all the British and Commonwealth dead of those wars could come back here today and march four abreast past their memorial in Whitehall, the head of the procession would be here now at the cenotaph. Its tail would be in Edinburgh. Hard by the cenotaph, in the splendor of Westminster Abbey, lies another memorial, the grave of the unknown warrior. And 70 years ago, on the 11th of November 1920, the body of this unknown soldier, unknown by rank, by name, or by regiment, was brought to lie at rest here among the kings and the princes and the statesmen and the poets. It had been the idea of an army chaplain that the body of an unknown British soldier should be disinterred from a battlefield in France and brought with full military honors to lie within the abbey, a grave which would honor all those whose courage and discipline and suffering had helped save their country in its peril. It was 2 years after the armistice of 1918 that the unknown soldier's body began its homeward journey to England. On the night of November the 9th, it rested in the castle at Boulogne, guarded by soldiers of the French army. Next morning, in a coffin made of oak cut from the woods at Hampton Court, the body of the dead soldier was taken in procession through Boulogne to the quayside, thence by sea to Dover, and on its way to London. On the morning of Thursday, the 11th of November, it was placed on a gun carriage of the Royal Horse Artillery and moved in procession to Whitehall, draping the coffin the Union flag, a flag that had originally been given to a young padre by his mother and had been used at many burial services on the Western Front. And on the crimson of the flag was laid a soldier's webbing belt, sidearms, and a steel helmet. When it reached Whitehall, the funeral procession came to a halt a few paces to the north of the cenotaph. King George V, as chief mourner, placed a wreath of laurel leaves and of red roses on the coffin. And then, in the uniform of Field Marshal, the King approached the tall monument of Portland stone which had been built in the center of Whitehall and was still shrouded by two enormous Union flags. As Big Ben struck 11, he pressed a button. The two great flags slipped to the ground, and the cenotaph in all its simplicity was revealed to the public for the first time. After the 2 minutes silence, the funeral procession moved on to Westminster Abbey. Borne by 8 non-commissioned officers of the Guards, the coffin was brought to the north door and carried down the nave, where a guard of honor was found by 100 holders of the Victoria Cross. The grave in which they buried the unknown soldier was filled in with earth specially brought over from the battlefields of France. And today that grave is covered by a slab of black Belgian marble edged by Flanders poppies. Above it, in the northwest corner of the abbey, hangs the same Union Jack that covered the coffin on its journey from France to London, its colors now fading with age. And on a stone pillar only a few paces from the grave, there is the bell from HMS Verdun, the destroyer which brought the body of the unknown warrior home across the Channel. In those days, after the burial of the unknown warrior, nearly 500,000 people came from all over the United Kingdom to pay homage here in the Abbey and at the cenotaph. Long queues stretched down Whitehall, waiting to lay flowers and pause for a moment in silence. It was, reported the Times, a national pilgrimage, waiting to lay flowers and pause for a moment in silence.